Okay, welcome. My name is Melanie Henning, and I am one of the instructional coaches at the middle school, high school level at the American School of Monterey. I'm glad that you've come here to join us. Now, you might be wondering how a little known instructional coach from Monterey, Mexico, well, originally from Canada, but currently from Monterey, Mexico, found herself presenting with the Myron Dweck. For those of you that might not know him, he has a book called Grading Smarter, Not Harder, and a recent addition to that pile of books, Giving Students a Say, Smarter Assessment Practices. So it goes back to a moment that we found ourselves connected in a high-speed chase, in a sketchy area of town, with a cell phone, and I would say a happy end result. But if you really want to hear the whole story, then I'll ask that you stick around with us and stay here for the full hour. So in your note taker, and if you haven't had a chance to open up that note taker and you just want to write this down, I want you to think about the last new thing you learned. A lot of us have found ourselves with a little extra time on our plates, or more time at home and doing different things. I, for example, have decided to finally focus on taking up the piano. It's something that I've always wanted to do my whole life, and now I find myself with a little more time at home, and so I, have started playing more music. While you're doing that, I want you to reflect on these questions. How did you know when you were making progress in that learning? How did you know when you had learned what you set out to learn? And what helped you learn? Now, just a moment, I'm going to ask that you write in the chat the answer to the second question. How did you know when you had learned what you set out to learn? Take some time to write your answer in the chat and feel free to hit send when you have it. Lots of different things come up. They could explain it to somebody else. They felt confident enough to share it with somebody. It looked and tasted how they thought it was supposed to. Approval from a 6-year-old son. I have this too. A final product that worked. Now, I'd like you also to take a moment now to share your answer to the first question. How did you know when you were making progress? You might not necessarily have been ready to share, but you could see that you were making some progress. Feel free to write that and share it in the chat. Didn't have to ask as many questions. It took less time. So I will tell you, as I've been learning the piano, I grew up singing in a choir, so I knew the right hand really well, and I knew how to read that music. But the left hand was a super big challenge for me. And every time I get a new piece of music, I think I'm never going to make any progress. It sounds clunky and it feels awkward. But when I start to see that the two hands are working together, that's how I know I'm making progress. Super fast. What helped you learn? Practice, a patient sister, practice, 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 repetition, a really good video. Anybody have an accountability person? I would send like progress to a friend who is a musician, which was super stressful, but I knew that he would be honest with me. An exemplar, time, talking to the pros. Okay, so we all know that we obviously have that ability to learn. What about our students? Do they have that ability to learn and drive their own learning? This quotation resonates with me as we're speaking to this topic. The only person who is educated is the one who has learned how to learn and change. And I feel as though this quotation is really pushing us and rethinking about how and what education looks like and what it should look like for our students. How can we make them the drivers of their process, drivers of their learning process, much in the way that we were when we took on that new learning ourselves? So I'm going to start with the first little bit, and then Myron's going to come in and share some of the strategies that he's been using with students in his district. And we're going to kind of follow that pattern today. So the first thing I want you to do is think about this question. How confident do I feel that students can consistently answer these questions? Where am I going? Where am I now? And how do I close the gaps? I'm going to give a little plug out to Ms. Mary Bry, who I believe has joined us today too. Mary Bry is the creator of these scales that are a super useful tool to use in your classroom. Her product is called Mindful Steps, and you can find her on Teachers Pay Teachers. She's got some freebies out there, but then she also has some packages of scales to use in the classroom. And these are a great concrete way for students to be able to kind of identify where they feel that they're at, and then maybe get into the abstractness of the reflection. So I'd like you to use this scale today. Rate your level of comfort using this scale in answering and whether or not students can answer these three questions. Place yourself on the scale. And I want you to think about why you placed yourself on the spot in the continuum that you did. At this point right now, we're just taking a moment to notice. We might not be able to name necessarily why we feel like we're here, but we're just noticing it and kind of starting that reflective process to think about where we might be in our learning. So let's take a look at where we're going in our session today. Our goals or targets or outcomes, whatever you might call them at your school, are to look at building success criteria for and with students, and to help students track their progress and make those informed choices. So what I'd like to do is just to give you a little bit of new information here right now, quickly before we get started. We haven't talked a lot about, you probably use a lot of learning outcomes in your classroom, or you might call them learning targets, or you might call them personal learning goals. And they are really the way with which we unpack our standards. We look at the knowledge, the skills, and the understanding or application. The thing about learning outcomes for students is that they tend to be somewhat abstract. And so many people are arguing right now that in order for them to truly be able to track their progress and measure whether they're heading in the right direction, they need to break them down into success criteria, break those learning outcomes down into success criteria. And the success criteria is more concrete, something they will say, do, make, write to indicate that they are actually moving toward the learning outcomes. So if these are our learning outcomes, how will we know that we have successfully met them? Take a moment in the chat right now to think about what success might look like if we meet these learning outcomes by the end of our session. What might we see ourselves doing? How will we know we are successful in learning these two things? Okay, based on the chat, I can see that this work could be somewhat difficult for people, and that's okay. It is tough, and it is something that might be new to many of us. So what I did was I thought about a couple of our own success criteria as well, and thank you for those of you that have contributed. I think that we should be able to make a list of success criteria ourselves to measure progress toward a learning goal. I also think that we could probably identify what our starting point might be in our own classrooms. And perhaps we could identify strategies that could work with our learners and start a plan. So I want you to go back to that learning moment that you had previously. And I want you to try this out. Think of that new learning. And I want you to think about what did you do, say, or feel to know that you had successfully learned something new? If you were to come up with a list of your own success criteria, what might that be? So for some people, it's a feeling of confidence. You could see the next steps. What were you able to do? So my actual goal was to be able to sing and play the piano at the same time. And so I had to measure my success of that because I actually did a Zoom recital in June with some 5 and 6 and 7 and 8-year-olds. I was the oldest one in the group. But it was, before I knew that I was ready to do that performance, I definitely had to measure myself against a couple different things. Did I feel like I sounded okay? Did my song flow? Was I matching the rhythm of the song to my voice? And so I kind of made myself this list of criteria that I wanted to make sure I had in place before I opened up my vulnerability and shared it with a public audience. And this is kind of the mindset that we have to think about with our kids. How do we get to that point where the kids check that success criteria and make sure that they're ready to share it. Oftentimes in our previous practice, we would have them hand it in and we would tell them if they met the success criteria or not. But if we can flip that and they can say, I want to try it first before I know whether or not it's ready to share, having that success criteria in place will really help them kind of monitor and track that progress so that they know if they are ready to share that out. So I would like to tell you, and there's some ASFM teachers in here that have been playing around with this a little bit, it isn't necessarily easy right from the get-go to have students constructing their own success criteria. So we do a bit of a scaffolded, or we've started to play around with a bit more of a scaffolded process. The first step that we usually take is that we write that success criteria for students. We write it. But then what we do is we encourage them to then monitor their progress toward that success criteria. It could be as simple as a lesson. It could be within a unit as they're making progress and collecting more evidence of learning. And then once they've had that opportunity to start to monitor their progress and see how their evidence is aligning to that success criteria, then we encourage them to start thinking about, okay, so if this is your goal, how will you know when you've successfully made it? And we tend to see that they own the process a whole lot more when they can come up with that own criteria. All right, Myron. Ready to rock?
I think I am. And,
all right.
And Ty, your comment right off the bat really strikes me. You know, when Ty writes, the struggle I have is motivating students to establish their learning goals. They aren't influenced by grades. I hope to show you something, Ty, that we've been working on at our school that might help with that. And first of all, big hello to so many familiar faces and new ones. Mel, should I share my screen or what?
Yep.
Okay, I can do that. You should see the word okay. Give me a thumbs up if you see okay. Nice, thank you. So first of all, just a pleasure to take part in this. Thanks, Mel, for the invite. My son is not happy with me at the moment. He's out there on the skating rink on our property. I'm coming to you from British Columbia, Canada. It's -3 Celsius today. I shot this last night and we're ready to roll today. So he's like, Dad, seriously, you weren't going to have a conference today? Well, sorry. I like the people at ASFM and those around them. So here I am. Just a quick little update because I want to set the context for what I'm talking about today. The last time I was at the conference in Monterey, I was Vice Principal of Assessment and Innovation in my district. With the onslaught of COVID and not being able to visit schools, that got axed. And on August 13th, I thought I had been cursed. They asked if I wanted to be Vice Principal of Summerland Secondary for this year. I was like, oh no. But I reluctantly said yes. And then they said, oh, and by the way, we want you to co-teach a grade 10 to 12 leadership class. And I'm sure many other people have been duped in this thing called education before. I was like, running a leadership class in a COVID year, are you crazy? But I did it, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. So that's my very own window right there. I thought I was going to be having that window behind me, but I'm presenting from home today. So I have a question for everybody. Okay, get ready in your chat room. I got to get the, where's my chat? There it is. Okay, ready in the chat room. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about constraint. I'll bet that all of us have felt a little bit of constraint this year. So here's your question. All right, ready on the chat room? Ready? In 1 or 2 words, how would you define or describe constraint? Look at that, hey? All right, thank you, everybody. So I'm right with you, and this is why I left it in the truck. I have the book right beside me here. This is why when I started the leadership class, I was feeling these kinds of things, right? The very words that you guys were bringing up generally centered around limitations and restrictions. Fetter, by the way, is a chain around your ankle. Had to put that one in there. But we feel this limitation, right? We have these boxes around us. And this is exactly how I was feeling when I took on this leadership class. I didn't even want to do it. I just said, let's cancel leadership this year. It's ridiculous to even try. And that's when I went looking. My principal said, no, Myron, we got to run leadership. And by the way, we had students in session. Most students were there for half a day. And that's when I went looking, and I found a book by Adam Morgan and Mark Barden called A Beautiful Constraint. And I'm going to do a shout out right now for this book. It changed my thinking around constraints and how we can look at them as beautiful things. And I'll be really quick. They make an argument that, what do you think a tennis game would be like without constraints? No boundary lines, no fence around the tennis court. How about the relationships we have, the ones that are most dear to us? Are they not kind of defined by constraint? You can't do anything you want to the people around you. So anyway, here's what I want to do. I want to look at the definition of constraint. And yes, we're getting back to success criteria. Okay. If someone says like, what is this? Am I suddenly in a session on constraint? Well, you kind of are, but we're going to get back. Okay. So a limitation imposed by circumstances such as COVID or by ourselves that affects our ability to do something. Real quick, somebody put in a constraint. Just mention, what's a constraint you put on yourself? Just for an example, somebody. I have one. Yeah, sorry, definitely, Kate. Time. Vegetarian diet. Yep. There you go. I don't know if anybody else, I decided with Ruffles all dressed chips, I can only eat one at a time. Like not stacking like 3 chips in my mouth, but just, I see smiles right away. I can't be alone. All right. Okay. So if constraint can be self-imposed, yeah, Bernardo, sweets guaranteed. None after 10 p.m. If it's a limitation imposed on ourselves, let's think about this. Okay. Hey, Mel, did you warn people or no?
Yeah, the first slide, but it was kind of a rushed start.
Okay. Does anybody grab a piece of paper? Any piece of paper will do. Do you have one near you? I'm going to give, I'm going to give everybody just a moment of time. Try to find a piece of paper. Give me a little wave of your piece of paper in your screen if you got one. Some people do. There we go. Okay. Here's a little activity you can do in your classroom. And if you don't have a physical piece of paper in front of you, just imagine that you have one. And who's the fellow with all the flags behind you? I just have to ask.
Hello, I'm Terry Christian from Venezuela, Caracas, Venezuela, Escuela Campo Alegre.
Nice to meet you. I love the flag background, by the way.
Thank you.
Okay, so everybody's got a piece of paper. Step 1, you need to do this. Fold it in half. Quick. Fold. Nice. Mel, you're jumping ahead. Okay, fold it in half. I took these pictures on my pool table. So that's the felt background, just so everybody knows. Okay, step 2, fold it in half again. Okay. I saw some people were a little late to this one, like, oh, I guess we're actually going to do something with this piece of paper. So I'm not sure what your name is. You just grabbed it out of your binder finally with the white sweater on. I'm watching. Okay, nice fold. Okay, now if you fold it in half again, you should have this. Exactly. You're checking your watch. I know this is going on way too long. I get it. Okay, so fold it in half again. Now, if you unfold it, you're going to have 4 squares. And I want everybody think a little bit about doing this in your own classroom with your own students. I've done it and it works well. Just wait. Okay, so you got 4 squares. Next, find a writing utensil. Anything will do. Can I use a piece of chalk? Sure. How about a stone where I scratch it into the paper? Absolutely. Pen or pencil does work best though. Okay, if you've got a writing utensil, here we go. When you are asked the question, you are only going to have 40 seconds to answer it. Okay. So what we're doing here is a self-imposed constraint. 40 seconds. That's it. You're like, Myron, it's not a lot of time. No, you're right. It isn't. Here's how it's going to work. Say you were asked what you think of oranges. And you might write oranges are best because they have peel and they're durable and they're super tasty. You want to draw a little tree. Great. Then you're going to get to the next question. And imagine somebody asked you a question and you don't know what to say. Just start your pen moving. Okay. So you start your pen moving. Maybe you're drawing a Formula One racetrack and you're just not sure what you're going to write. And you're like, hold on. I got an idea coming to me. I only have 40 seconds, but I know that's a terrible O. I think about, and then you just start writing. Okay. Okay. So this is called Crazy Fours. You're welcome to try this in your classroom. We're doing it today in our session. Melanie has already taken us through notice. Now we're going to name where we're at. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about nurture. Okay. So you're only going to have 40 seconds a question. And I'm going to put a song underneath so that while you're listening to the song, you know the 40 seconds is still going. When the song changes, we're shifting our question. Okay? Here we go. What could you do next to support your students in using or building success criteria in your classroom? What could be your next step? I'm starting the timer after I state the question. Ready? Here we go. Ten seconds. All right. Next square. What is your biggest hurdle that you see in developing student success criteria in your classroom? What do you think the biggest hurdle is going to be to that? Here we go. Next song. Question number 3. So how might clear and usable success criteria support students in tracking their own progress? There's lots of research around how powerful this is. So how will clear and usable success criteria support students in tracking their own progress? Next song. And lastly, how might clear and usable success criteria support things like social emotional learning or student disposition or perhaps mindset? And you might want to think about your own perspective on this, about what you learned earlier. but how will this support students in those areas? Away we go. And that would be time's up. Okay. Now, Mel, I know I'm going a little off script here, but I decided to do the first book contest early. And here it is. Not that last song, which is Mission Impossible, but the 4 songs used in Crazy Fours. If anyone's sitting there going, I have heard these songs, where? Well, if anyone can name the source or soundtrack of those songs in Crazy Fours, I'll send them a book. If anyone, and it's going to have to be specific. Like, I have heard those before. Anyway, so what we need is 4 people to share in Crazy. Eva, seriously? How do you know that's Daniel Hart? And you better turn your mic on. Come on. Eva?
Hello.
Hi, how? How do you know that?
I don't know. I just like a lot of classical music, and I usually save all this type of music, and I really putting them or that my students listen then while they're working.
Well, it just paid off today. That's Daniel Hart, and those are all songs off the S-Town podcast, which I'm not going to officially endorse on this particular venture, but I love that podcast. I could not stop listening to it. S-Town. Anyway, that's where all the songs are from. Okay, back on track. We need 4 people to share. Melanie's never going to ask me to join her again, ever. 4 people to share. Can somebody put in the chat room something? Yes, Julie, I know. Something around, so what's your next step? What are you going to do? Go look at your loops documents. Linda Suzanne, you must be from ASFM. That the loops, I think Melanie has talked about those. Julie, you have got to be kidding me. Let's talk about that later. You taught in Woodstock, Alabama? Okay, back on track, back on track. Build in time, create checklists, cool. Okay, we're gonna continue with constraint. What's your biggest hurdle? What do you think is going to be the challenge? Yeah, time. This might be a way. This might be a way to getting student buy-in. Students aren't doing anything, their attitude, for sure. How about this? What role do you think this plays in students tracking their own learning? What do people put in there? Awesome. Look at how much is flying in here. It's just an example of in the ways we can engage through this medium. This is fantastic. And lastly, how about what role does this play in supporting SEL, student disposition? Maybe you tackle this from your own perspective. Yeah. So seeing self-confidence, reducing stress, boosting confidence, knowing where they're going. Don't we all want to know that? Empowering students to do things on their own? For sure. So, I think Melanie did a fantastic job of structuring this presentation. I like this notice We've just done a whole lot of naming. And I think that with so many people mentioning time as their biggest hurdle, what about reaching out to another person either in this very chat or a colleague in your school that you know is a part of this today, or somebody in another school, and maybe teaming up a little bit to say, how could we maybe be buddies on this one and work together? So, so what we've got is our third step, and that is nurture. Okay. So all I thought about doing here, and where this started was Melanie and I were just chatting the other day, and Melanie, I hope you chime in through this section because this is your presentation. I'm just like kind of like a Canadian invasion here. We talked about nurture. So I just want to give a couple examples of things we are trying right now in our very own school to try to answer these questions. Where are we going? Where am I now? And how am I going to close that gap? And I wanted to be sensitive to people who've been in my sessions before at the last conference in Monterey, not to show things that I had already shown there. These things are brand new. So let's start here. During the onset of COVID, had a young teacher in our school by the name of Marcus Blair, and his Twitter is at Mr. Blair's class. I believe if you've seen him on Twitter, you might see him on my feed. He chimes in regularly. He started looking at projects during the COVID era that were much more inquiry based. So for example, he would say, you're going to have to come up with a secret police project for a member of the Russian Revolution, because he wasn't able to necessarily teach the Russian Revolution in the same way he had before. Plus, like many other people, they were finding that their students were just Googling the answers in remote settings and getting really frustrated. So it's pretty hard to Google this one, and it's really hard to copy off your friends if you have to come up with your own police file. So where I'm going with this is he gave them a planning sheet, but this is the part I most want to talk about. I started to see evidence in my own school of people being really clear about the objective. We want you to use historical inquiry processes and skills, and then starting to embed success criteria. And what Marcus is playing around with here is, could he give students the proficient level and some of that success criteria, but then provide space on each side of that for people to interact, or even for him. So check out the way it can look. This example is from his grade 10 English class. He just sent me an image, and this gives him the opportunity to let students know, hey, where are you pushing this kind of thinking into like sophisticated, and where might you still be at beginning and developing? And what we're talking about here is this. This is, I think, a really good example of building success criteria for and with students. And when we talk about with, this has been our latest step, and this is all but a week old. And I'm not suggesting we're the first people to do this, but it's the first time done in our school. And that's this. What if we get students to write in those other sides? So let me give you an example. If you look at this student, you say, how is she showing sophistication? She said, I did not stray from the first person. I've created a powerful story. I like her writing down below. I used a very limited amount of to be verbs. And the story was true to myself and my own tone. We're taking a sophisticated look at this when students start writing about the tone of their writing. So I found this to be really powerful in a way to invite students into this conversation. And you'll notice there on the developing side, she writes, I tend to ramble on with my sentences. And I forget who brought it up way back in the chat. But the question is, how do we motivate students? And I'm going to be honest with you guys. My own son is in this class. This isn't his form, but he's in this, and he's talking about a motivation in English that I've never, ever heard him mention as long as he's been in school. The other day we were tying our skates by the hockey rink, and he's talking about this form in school. I didn't even ask him about it. He brought it up about saying, Dad, maybe this is the kind of stuff you talk about. I don't know, but I've been having to explain where I'm at in my writing and where I'm at in English rather than the teacher telling me where I'm at. And everybody, like, I had to take like crazy glue and glue my mouth shut because I've been a part of forming these, and it took all of my effort not to say anything. Nora, why have 4 levels? To answer your question, British Columbia next year, grades K to 9, is moving to these 4 levels. No percentages, no letter grades. And some of our high school teachers are looking over at this saying, I kind of find this language interesting. So if that answers your question. But I think it's an example of this. It's helping students track their progress and make informed decisions. So I think, Nora, to answer your question, I think it could be as many levels as you want it to be. The one thing we're trying to shift away from in our school is 100 levels. I think that's too many. When someone talks about their writing, I don't know if they should say I'm a 72% writer. They might want to say I've become a sophisticated writer, or I'm proficient in my writing. So, Mel, these examples are available to people. Do you have anything to throw in before I move to another example, or anybody have a question?
These are connected, just to let you know, on the note taker under resources.
For sure. So here's something else we're trying. Alan, the principal, and I are teaching this grade 12, 10 to 12 leadership class, like I told you about, right? And we were coming up to reports. And I thought, I tried this years ago in my leadership class. I kind of rekindled it. I didn't know what to write for a lot of the students in leadership class. I was struggling to know what to put on their report card. So I decided to ask them. So I asked them, how do you think you're doing on your journal? How are you doing on event planning? How are you doing on event participation? And so on and so on. And some of you may be like, what's the BDPS? Well, that's beginning, developing, proficient, sophisticated. And some of you might be like, I'm going to ask this as a trivia question to you guys. Why is the S there on some boxes but shaded out on others? Sophisticated. Anybody want to speculate why your journal has a solid S there, but you go over to community and volunteer hours and it's a shaded out S? Anybody want to speculate?
Well, because some things are yes or no. Like some things there's no difference between, say, proficient and sophistication. You've either done it or you haven't. There's not a mastery level, so to speak.
Perfect. Thank you. And your name is?
Joy.
Joy. So Joy, I appreciate you saying that, because this is exactly where we're struggling. Some teachers are saying, I like this scale, but what the heck am I supposed to do when some of the things I'm assessing in my classroom it's not even possible to be sophisticated? Great point. Which brings us to our next piece. And that's exactly what you're saying, Joy. So what we did was this. We said, listen, we want you to begin to describe where you think you are on these things, but you don't even have the option of sophisticated on things that we really don't believe you can show sophistication. Now, I said to students, because this is so new, if you believe you can show sophistication, by all means, make your argument. But this is what we moved to. And by the way, we do still have to create a percentage. And I said this to students. By the law in British Columbia, Canada, we still need to put a percentage on your report card. So I want you to start thinking about what percentage you might be. And I was really clear with my students. I don't like the idea of percentages, but I'm forced to put one on. But but I want your input when I come up with that number. So, and Joy, I appreciate your comment there. I loved it too. Boy, did it take the pressure off me and trying to come up with this. So what did it end up looking like? Literally the hour before I rolled this out with my class, I thought, hang on, I also want to know what their reasoning is for making their decision. And then stealing a page from John Hattie, if you don't know what your next step is, if you don't know what your next piece to work on is, you haven't received feedback. You haven't thought about it. So what's the next thing you're going to work on? So here's what happened. Some students grabbed their highlighter and began to highlight their areas in. We've done this with a grade 3 class also in a similar way. So I know that both of these examples are from high school, but there's no question in my mind that we can do this with younger students. And Julie, I'm with you. They got to make a claim. That's true. But what's the evidence that's backing that up? And it looks like Ty agrees. So you have shading. Some students had check marks. But here's what I really, really liked when it came to writing out reports. Students dove in on this. We did not have a problem with student buy-in. And I got to think that including students in coming up with their own success criteria and reflecting on it, as well as the next steps they're going to take, have been very, very valuable. And these are just a few of the examples. I'm not expecting you to read all this. I believe these are in your handouts to have a look at. And this is, you can just see different ways that different students are chiming in. So, I like her comment on things to work on. I got to be more confident in my own ideas in order to plan more for our school. And I know this student well, and she does struggle with confidence. She's got good ideas, but she's not confident in them. And that's what she's working on. So before I leave this, are there any questions? Anything at all about rollout, what it looked like?
Yeah, Myron, I just have a quick question. Ty McCubbin here. So in throughout all of this, what role have you had in sort of forming your kind of your perception of where the student is at, having them create their perception, and having a conference to talk about, kind of how we do in evaluations, professional evaluations, where we see us as this is where our evaluator sees us, and we have that discussion. How do you invite that, or what have you thought about?
Oh, great question. And before your comment disappears, Joy, in case other people put this in, these were unbelievably helpful in writing my report card comments, because my report card comments, this is gonna tie in, pardon the pun, to why do I say those things? I don't know. This is going to tie into your question, and that is Anne Maria's as well. That's just popped in there. I have over 100 students. Ty, what I do is I make 2 or 3 piles. Okay, I'm going to sit there, and as far as your 100 students go, Maria, have them begin to write their own report, and you can go home and pour your favorite glass of water, and you can sit there, and you can have a look at this one, and Ty, guess what pile this one goes on to? I completely agree. I think the student is really, really encompassing where they're at. Then you get to one where you go, I don't know. And you're welcome to put this question in your back pocket. The question starts with, help me understand. Okay? So this person, I'm going to have a conversation with them, which starts with, help me understand how you're arriving at this conclusion, because here's some of the evidence I'm looking at. And Ty, I've got their journal response grades. I've got their attendance record. I've got and the only reason I bring up attendance because it's a leadership class, and it's pretty hard to get involved in leadership if you're not showing up. And so I kind of make these 2 piles. And I don't know if there's any coaches out there, but I'm going to bring up a coaching analogy, because I discussed this very issue in my book. And that is, as a coach, if I asked my volleyball team, like, hey, how good is your defense right now, each player? And I got a player, Ty, that says, oh, my defense is fantastic. If you disagree with that, is that information valuable, Ty? Now you've got information in front of you that you don't agree with. Is it valuable?
I would, I mean, yeah, I would say, you know, from what I see, the evidence might say contrary to what you say. So yeah, I would, yeah.
It might help you understand why that player is making certain decisions in a game. They've got a different view than you have. What if your basketball player says, I'm the best point guard in the league? Oh, that's why she's given that ball away at the end of the game with an errant pass. If I have a student who says, my involvement in class is fantastic, and I don't believe it is, it's my job to help that student understand that there's a disconnect there. But at least it's valuable to know that. Right? Anyway, I'm going to hang around here to chat, even though my son is going to be extra irritated. So if there's people who want to stick around into the lunchtime, we are more than welcome. Look at Melanie and I having the same comment at the same time. I think what this is doing, Ty and Maria, it's helping students make informed choices, looking at their progress. And I think that's the key piece here. And Maria, I got 35 kids in that leadership class, and this is the easiest time I've ever had writing reports. I'm just going to tell you that. So lastly, what about something like social emotional learning? This is something that Melanie and I worked on together, and I'm really hoping Melanie's going to talk a little bit about this because they're using it at ASFM. So Melanie, how about I click and you talk?
Perfect. I can do that. This actually came from, I don't think Elaine is here, but one of our ninth grade math teachers who had a class that was struggling, not as much academically, but just, with management and kind of self-regulation. And so she wanted them to kind of create goals around that so that they could be more focused in class, that they could be kind of staying on top of their work. And so she asked them to create goals. And what we saw was that students really wrote in generalizations like, oh, well, I just want to pay more attention, or I want to be more present, but it didn't really speak to the specifics about how they might do that. And so we said, you know what, this is kind of new for them. We're not sure that they really have the capability at this point of going into that concrete. So we looked at, what were some of the issues that students might be dealing with: time management, task initiation, sustained attention, emotional control, and impulse control. Those were our 5 that we saw going on in the classroom. And we came up with our own I can statements for, what we thought the actions they might need to take were in order to be able to be more successful in this area. Then we really scaffolded it by saying, you know what, we're going to talk about our class as a whole. Do you think is the area that we need to focus on the most as a class? And they went through and they voted, and they chose, I believe it was impulse control as their first option. And then she said, okay, so we're all going to work on impulse control next week. What are some actions that you can take specifically to work on impulse control and contribute to that overall class goal? So the kids came up with their ideas, and then they wrote them down, and then they did check-ins after every class. How well did I meet the goal that I set for myself? And if they couldn't meet it, she said, you know what, maybe you need to come up with something a little bit more realistic. So think about what you're going to do in the next class, because this didn't work for you. And they really got into that habit of doing those check-ins. By the end of the week, they said, okay, how did I do? And should I be doing something different next week? So then she said, all right, so we've worked together. They did that for a couple of weeks. So they got into the habit of kind of tracking that impulse control and coming up with specific actions that they could take. And she actually did start to see a noticeable shift quite quickly within the class. So then she said, okay, we've worked on this as a group. Now I want you to look at this list again and think about you specifically. What is it that you need to work on? So they went back, they did their voting, they ranked them. So this is what we have also found. If you give all 5 of them and give each 5 a scale of 1 to 5 and say, all right, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, they'll probably put themselves at 3 or 4 or 5 for every single one. But if you force them to order them and say, okay, put your strongest at the top and the one that you need to work on the most at the bottom, then they have no choice to then really pull out the one that they really want to work on. And sometimes we also work on the one that they are really good at, because then they, we look at our grows and we look at our glows. And so this is the form then that they used once they had chosen their individual I can statement. And so they took the I can statement right from the ones that Elena and I had built together, and then they came up with a goal. They had to share it with the teacher, and her and I looked at these goals and said, how specific are they? And we gave them a little bit of feedback, and then they revised their goal, so they were ready to get started at it. And then if we look down, you can see we've got some more specific revised goals. Teacher gave some feedback, and then the kids had some criteria to measure their growth toward that goal against, and took some time to reflect.
I think we're doing okay with the syncing here, Mel.
I think it's working. So they looked at different reflection questions per week and looked at,
that never happens to me. I hate when that happens.
The amount of time we joke, sorry, this is an aside, but we joked about how my ghetto slide deck at the beginning was going to match up to his like super professional slide deck at the end. And the amount of time this man puts into slides is just amazing.
Ty, I know you're laughing, but this one's going to bug me for the next hour and a half. That those words did not go into that box properly.
So, but the point being is that the kids kind of kept coming back to that goal and making adjustments. Oftentimes we get kids to set goals, and then they just kind of float around and they hang out and don't really, have that concrete actionable steps to go with it, or they'll look back and say, is this goal working for me? Do I need to adjust it? And so they went through this 3-week cycle to see if they noticed any change. And then they revisited and said, is that something that you still need to work on, or could we work on something else?
So, all we tried to do today was kind of share 3 different tools at the very end, all of which are really new. And there's some questions coming in, Mel, that you might want to answer. I know that we also want to be respective of people's time, and there's a little giveaway coming up, by the way. So Mel, maybe you want to talk just briefly about this and why this is maybe a sum up for us.
So this is just this is borrowed from Global Online Academy, but again, another thing that helps students really measure and track their progress. And we wanted to give this opportunity to you as well. At the end of new learning, how can they kind of summarize what they took away from it? And so if you look on your note taker, this is at the very end for you, but just, something as simple as, what are 3 important points that I took from it? What is something that aligns that I can connect to that really like squares with my practice, or I think that, I could buy into this because, and then something that's still circling around in your head. And this something that's still circling around in your head is really great information for the teacher too, because if they say some common trends, that might be something that you want to address in your next lesson with the kids. Or if there's, a group of 5 that are still circling with the same thing, that's a great opportunity to dive into, some small group instruction the next day. So any of these little check-ins has benefits for, both the learner and the teacher.
So on that note, Mel and I are going to hang around a little bit, like we said, afterwards. But here's what I want you to put in your chat room to be, if you want to be in on the game. All we need to know is, how many students approximately go to your school? How many students attend the school you teach at?
Hey, Myron.
Yeah?
We also promised that we would tell them the full story.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, while the chat room is filling in, I got my phone, and
they don't know about the phone.
this maybe wasn't the absolute, what's that, Mel?
They don't know about the phone. I didn't tell them what happened.
Oh, sorry. So I was getting a ride from ASFM to our hotel. I'll tell this story very quickly. And I was in the car with two guys who were they had a booth at your conference. They were representing a company in the United States. So I didn't actually get their last names. They had organized the Uber ride. So I get back to the hotel and I'm feeling for my phone, and it's like, hold on. I had it on my knee, and I guess when I got out of the car, it probably fell, but it wasn't my Uber ride. So it took me an hour and a half to find these guys in the hotel. Then we had a small army of people trying to discover, can we contact Uber? That was useless. And then somehow we got the idea of phone tracker. And shortly thereafter, we were driving in somebody's car, two laptops open, and we were following my phone through Monterrey, Mexico. And let's just say we found the phone at a gas station. And there were people the next day, yes, Ty, totally, that were like, how did you not get shot? Because this phone was under the spare tire of this guy's trunk. And you can see my phone still has the tracking on the screen, and I decided to get a selfie with him, and I survived it. So I still have my phone. I'm not sure that whole thing was really well thought out enough. But anyway, we found the phone in his trunk. He was the Uber driver, but it's a little mysterious as to how the phone would get underneath the spare tire, but I guess it fell there. Although I can't recall helping him change a tire. But anyway, it just happened that way. So here's the deal. All right, Mel, have you looked through the list here? We decided what the criteria would be beforehand, and it looks to me that we might have a winner here. I'm going to give another book away today, and here it is. All right. Looks to me like the winner is probably Terry. We were going with smallest school. The people who are like putting 2,380 or 26,000 students are like, yeah, I got this. And it's like, no, it was smallest school. The reason I go there is I teach in a small school, and I know sometimes budgets are a little more difficult in small schools. So Terry, I'm gonna sign a book for you. I'm gonna send it to Melanie, if that's okay. And Melanie, you can probably get it distributed through your region. But listen, I'm gonna let Mel have the last word. It's her thing. But boy, does it feel good today to reconnect with people in your region. I'm missing your region incredibly. It's the warmth and the yeah, let's leave it at warmth that I always feel there from the people, not just the weather, is fantastic. So I look forward to being in your area again. I'm hoping that we do in-person conferences at one point again, as much as these are good. And I know a lot of people prefer this mode, but hey, thanks a lot. And Melanie, huge thanks to you. You put this thing together, and I think you jokingly invited me to be a part, and you probably didn't expect me to say yes. So
it might have been a joke, and then I don't think I heard from him, or my power went out for 2 days, and I'm like, that was a joke. Oops. No, thank you so much for coming and joining us, Myron. It's been fun. And you know, ASFM loves you, so we were pumped to have you here. We had a little snow in Monterey, not too much, not as bad as Texas, but yeah, it was cold for a couple days. Can
I throw one more thing in? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be quiet. We are going to hang around for questions. Eva, you're going to get a book sent to you, because I still can't understand how you came up with Daniel Hart that quickly. Like that's going to take me a little while to recover from it. And the resources are available. So, but anyway, I wanted to remind people we will hang around for some questions. Keep going, Mel. I'm really going to shut up now.
No, that was it pretty much. The only thing is for anybody that knows Monterey, we ended up in Topo Chico. And those of you that don't know Monterey, when our students from ASFM found out that we ended up in Topo Chico, they were like, oh yeah, every time our cell phones get stolen, they end up in Topo Chico, and we just let them stay there. So it was quite the adventure.
Well, and there was someone that came up to me after my keynote the next day when I kind of took a bit of humor in this, said, don't ever do that again.
I just blamed it on Google Maps. It was so quick. We were not really paying attention to where we were going. We're just following like the phone on Google Maps, and we just ended up there, but we got away.
Camila, it might've been you that said that to me the next morning. I don't know who did. If someone's in here that told me that the next morning, like Myron, make better decisions than that, they're welcome to admit. But maybe back to some of our examples. Is anybody hanging around to ask about this? I can do a stop share right now. Maybe just make this a little bit more.
Thanks, Danny.
Well, and to be clear, the one other thing I was going to say is I'm only stating this for ASFM's sake. In my latest book, this one, Melanie helped out a lot, and so did Elizabeth, Almote. Melanie, you can probably say the teacher's name.
Josh, he's here.
Really?
Josh is here. Yep.
Yeah. Josh, Elizabeth, and Joelle?
Yeah.
And I think he's moved to a different school, but Mark Osborne, they were all incredibly helpful. So this is a little bit of give back because I'm so grateful. And you guys all have books coming to you who are part of it. Ty, say hi to Mark for me. And I need his address because I don't think I put his book in that package. So have Mark get in touch with me because Mel, maybe I can send that to you also. Do you have a way of getting it to those people?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, Mark's fantastic. I have a great photo with him. I just saw it the other day. So yeah. Did I say already I'm looking forward to getting back to see you guys? Did I say that? How about any questions about our resources we shared, next steps, anything like that? There's still 38 people hanging around.
I have a question.
Sure.
I would like to talk about how to get students to be meaningfully interacting with the success criteria and with honestly gauging where they are and what they need to work on, while also admitting that there's a very real number-oriented grade culture still, especially in the high school level when it comes to colleges or scholarships or parents being angry. So I have a hard time getting students to authentically engage in success criteria and honest feedback and self-reflection and self-assessment when they know that there's this numerical aspect to it that I don't know how to separate those.
Well, if I can jump in on that first, Melanie, and you might certainly have some thoughts. And is it Julie?
Yes.
Yeah, and thanks, Julie, for your participation so far today. It's been awesome. When we've been numerically dependent in the past, and I'm speaking from my own experience here, if we're numerically dependent, it's been relatively easy for me to come up with those numbers because I have let's just say a test or an assignment that's out of a certain number and they got this many correct. I grab my calculator, I go, look, 92, and that's what it is. I think the next step we have to take, and you're going to have seen this in my leadership example I shared today, is attaching the numbers to those clear criteria. And maybe those numbers right now need to have a range. And I would love Mel to jump in because I know that ASFM has done some work around fewer categories and words attached to those. I think there's no question we have a numbers culture, but I think we have some significant steps to take in shifting that number culture. And it won't happen overnight. But but I'm seeing it in my own children because our school is now 4 years into this journey, and there's less discussion of I'm an 82% than there is I'm a proficient writer and here's why. So to answer your question in a nutshell, Julie, I think we need to make our criteria, success criteria, really clear, get students to specifically talk about how they're doing on those success criteria, and attach those to number ranges and have those conversations. So that's a little bit where we're at. And Mel, you might have some other thoughts.
I do know that, like, speaking to some high school teachers that have been playing around with this, the one thing that they are, when there is that concrete success criteria, like if you think back to that one column rubric that we looked at earlier, you know, and then where the kids speak to like where they feel like they're approaching and then where they feel like they might be, in our case, extending, that when there's really concrete success criteria in the middle, the kids are arguing less for where they feel that they are. And so it, you know, and when we're looking at it from evidence too, right? Like you show me the evidence that allowed you, or that allowed you to check this off. And so I think that there is less arguing, but they also really, really like when they can speak to why they feel as though they're at the extension level. So I was able to check all of the success criteria off, and this is how I think I took it one step further, for example. But, you know, when you get into the minutia of like exactly what's happening in developing or exactly what's happening in extension, I think that sometimes they feel a little bit boxed in, or they're not going through that reflective process too. And so to say, okay, why am I not reaching proficient as well? Let me think about myself and what I am doing or not doing, or what I still need to work on. And again, it's helping them with that through that metacognitive process to really think about themselves and their personal learning journey.
And I know there's a hand up in the box, but I wanted to echo Josh, who put it in the chat, is show exemplars. Like one piece of this that I didn't share with you is I put examples up of really strong journal entries. What makes a deep journal entry? What makes a profound journal entry? And specifically show them what that looks like is a big piece of it. And a hand up, go ahead.
Just right now, realizing through this process that we just did of the success criteria and all that, should we be focusing less on the content that students need to do in a specific time frame, semester, year-long course, and more on the skills, on these type of skills that we are talking about? Because as I see it, I have the liberty of creating like the standards. Let me know what the students need to do, and then but there's no course after that. Like they do drama, and then I don't expect anything else after it. Like there's no drama level 2 that the student needs to be proficient in these things to be able to. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. Like math 7th grade to math 8th grade. And the content needs to be, the student needs to be able to divide, the student needs to be able to do this, but with all this that we're doing right now, how can you focus on so many things, on so much content, if we're trying to focus on the process of learning?
Can I speak to that quick, Myron, and then let you jump in here? I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that our success criteria are aligned to our learning outcomes. And your learning outcomes come from your standards. So in a case like yours, Paco, that you're teaching drama, you know, and like if you look at your clusters, so you've got your connecting cluster, your responding cluster, your performance cluster, and your rehearsal one, whatever that one's called. I can't think of it. Practice. Yeah. And so if we think about too, like, so what are the skills in there that we're trying to develop? So let's look at performance, for example, and maybe the skill is that they're trying to bring together character attributes to make a successful character in a performance. The success criteria comes then from saying, okay, if we are able to create this successful character on stage, what kinds of things should be happening? What should we be doing? What would we be saying? So for example, a realistic voice to match the character. facial expressions. Like all of those things are the things that we look at for the success criteria. And so when kids are rehearsing and measuring their progress, they should be able to look at, okay, have I considered my voice? Is it realistic and connected to this character? Have I considered my facial expression? It's their little check-ins to say, am I doing all of the things that I need to do? And then I also think it's very difficult to say to a kid in a performance, whether they're at meeting or extension, like what does extension really look like? So how might they say, like, you know what, I think I had an amazing performance because I was able to meet all of the success criteria, and I could see that I had somebody in the audience crying. I reached that audience, you know, but they would come up with a rationale because they're the ones that are experiencing the performance and knowing how they feel that they might have taken it to the next level.
And is it Paco? Did you say, Mel?
Paco, yeah.
Paco, did you not come up and speak with me when I was at ASFM? I swear.
Yes.
Yeah. Nice to see you again. I think I might even have been in your classroom presenting or something like that. But anyway, you were a wonderful host. You know, and you might have seen me put this up here. So here's just, I had a parent meeting in Recife, Brazil for the American School at Recife, and 350 parents showed up, and it was called 5 Things Parents Need to Know About Global Education Right Now. And this is an idea that I have proposed to Mel for the next time I'm in town or whatever, even if not, do it remotely. What I show parents any chance I get right now is this. It doesn't really matter what the symbols are that you choose. I mean, the language matters, let's be sure, but it doesn't have to be this. This is what British Columbia is going to be trying. The point I want to make is this. I think many of us came through an education system where the learning standards were set as easy to Google standards. The only thing is we didn't have Google, right? So how did those learning standards start? They start with define, memorize, repeat. You know, Ty, if I asked you, I saw your head nod. If I ask you, hey, what's the kind of thing you were asked to memorize when you were in school? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, useless historical dates that have no relevance to my life.
Perfect. I was doing a session for Sacramento, California schools yesterday, and a guy said postal abbreviations. Yeah, exactly. And I'd like to know the last time somebody picked up a phone book. You know, like something has changed here. And here's the deal: if we shift our focus in education to not so easy to Google things like this, and I'm going to say, Paco, that in your course area, and I believe we talked about this when I was there, is you are creating, you are designing. It's not that knowing things isn't important. It's really important, okay? But it's what you do with those things that's far more important. So what's the shift? If you, and Julie, this is going back a little bit to your question. If you have a parent in Monterrey, Mexico, or wherever you're coming from, who's saying, but percentages were there when I was in school and I turned out okay. Absolutely. Percentages work really, really well for these things. They're fantastic. I got no hate on for percentages. They're lovely. They just don't work so well over here. And that might be where we need to have descriptors that describe what you're seeing in front of you, so that, Julie, you can have one student design something in your class and have another student design something in your class, and those can be very different. And that's where you might want to describe it rather than rate it, because percentages work well for rating, not so well for describing. And that's what I think today. Thanks, Camila. And Julie, I haven't happened to look at it, but DOK, absolutely. We are looking at the 4th level depth of knowledge terminology to build sophisticated questions. And oh, they need this accountant. They need this accountant in 5 minutes. I think somebody at Mission Control is going, can someone shut that Canadian up? And it's like, yes, I know. We'll have them time out. So, hey, Terry, did we get your address? Melanie, do you know where Terry is? Venezuela?
Terry, can you send it to me in the chat?
It's in the chat.
Oh, it is in the chat.
Sorry, Terry.
Sorry,
It's
I'm
in the chat, yeah.
okay.
Hey, listen, no one's going to be happier than my son that I'm timing out. So I love your area. I love you guys. Can't wait to see you again. I think the purpose of our conferences coming up is going to be connection. We can do this, but I think we need a little bit of face-to-face too. So I have a couple wonderful keynotes ready. If I can just get there, we'll try it. Stay safe, stay healthy, okay?
Thank you.